minutes. And I think our other presenter is going to start pretty soon. Just so you know, your microphone is muted.
Yeah, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. So first, let me introduce you all to the speaker of our webinar, Gina. She is a distinguished educator with nearly 30 years of experience at the Princeton Review. She has not only brings a wealth of expertise, she is having authorized essential AP exam prep books and served as a senior content developer also. Her engaging and effective teaching style has made complex concepts accessible to the countless students, and we are excited for you to benefit from her valuable insights and exceptional instructional skills. Now, over to you, Gina. You can start now.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It looks like we have a good group here. It's nice to see you all. Again, my name is Gina Donegan, and I am from the Princeton Review in the United States. And I teach a lot of different subjects, but one of the things that I do specialize in is AP tests, advanced placement tests. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you everything I know about what advanced placement tests are for and why you should consider taking some of them. And also I'm going to give you some general strategies for how you can do better on AP exams. So at this point, I have shared my screen with you. We're going to walk through a presentation here. You should see something in front of you that says Advanced Placement 101. By the way, if you think of any questions along the way, just maybe write them down. I will be able to take some of your questions at the end of this session. If any of you cannot see my screen, Advanced Placement 101, just let us know in the chat. Maybe we're having some technical problems, but I'll assume everyone can see it. So, let's kind of just start with what we do at Manya Group and the Princeton Review. We're partners in helping you along every step of your college or even graduate school journey. So for instance, we offer academic tutoring. We offer tutoring in the advanced placement tests, which we're going to talk about today. We offer a wide variety of courses that you might want to take to prepare for AP tests. And of course, we also offer prep courses for a variety of other tests, such as the SAT. So we're here to help you in your journey to apply to college, hopefully get into a great college. And then if you need help even beyond that to get into business school or graduate school, medical school, we're here for you through that process as well. So remember, to find out more information about all of this, you can go to manyagroup.com, which is how you got here. Just be aware that everything Manya offers is a Princeton Review product, and the Princeton Review has been around for over 30 years. We specialize in all of this material. So let's just take a look at what we're going to cover today. I apologize. I need to make sure I've got the right slides. There we go. So we're first going to talk about why you should consider taking the advanced placement exams, why it's important to you, and why it will actually help you to get into college. We're going to talk about generally what kinds of AP exams are available and what kinds of information they test you on. And we're also going to talk about general strategies you can use to do well on tests. But obviously, I'm not going to be able to prepare you for everything. So then we'll get into just more specifically how you can prepare. And also be aware that there are a large number of advanced placement tests. I am not an expert on all of them. So if you ask a question and it happens to be related to a test that I'm not familiar with, I'll be honest with you about that. But I'm here to just give you my general knowledge about the tests and how they work. So first of all, let's look at why you should consider taking advanced placement exams. First of all, they're not required, right? So there's no college that is going to expect you to have taken these tests as a requirement for admission. They're always optional. But the reason why you should consider taking them is because, first of all, if you're looking to get into a college in the United States, keep in mind that a lot of American applicants have taken these exams, especially people applying to the most competitive or most prestigious colleges. So given that probably most of the applicants will have taken at least one AP exam, and some of them perhaps have even taken many. I sometimes have students who take 5 or 6 AP classes sometimes. So given that other people have taken these exams, it's going to look good on your application if you have also done it. But again, it's not required, so it's entirely up to you if you want to do it. Now, in case you've never heard of advanced placement exams, let's talk about what they are and how they might compare to other tests that you have heard of. So for example, if you're looking to get into an American college, you've probably heard of the SAT exam. The SAT is a test that is designed to test a kind of broad knowledge of math and English skills. So it's really just tested on, it's really just focused on those two subjects. You don't need to know any science for the SAT. You don't need to know any history or, you know, basically any other topic. You don't even need advanced math for the SAT. For instance, there's no calculus on the SAT. The SAT is designed to test the math that almost any college-bound high school student would have learned along the way, and also English skills such as grammar, reading comprehension, and also just sometimes style or the best ways of phrasing things. There is no essay on the SAT. It is strictly a multiple choice test at this point. By the way, there's another test you might have heard of called the ACT. The SAT and the ACT are very similar. And if you want to get into college, you do need to take the SAT. It's going to be required by a lot of colleges, and even the ones that don't require it, you know, generally like it if you can send them high SAT scores. So think of the SAT as testing a broad knowledge of English and math that a lot of high school students would possess. But advanced placement tests are much more specific. Advanced placement tests are specific to a certain subject matter, and there are a number of subjects. I'm actually going to show you what all of them are in case you're curious. And the difficulty of the material is harder, okay? This is more like the kind of knowledge you would need if you were taking a college level course. Now, it's not as difficult as an upper level college course, but the material here is more difficult than what a lot of American high school students might experience. So for instance, if you were going to high school in the United States and you weren't looking to get into college, you probably wouldn't be doing AP level work. This is for students who are a little more ambitious and want something more difficult and want to get into a great college. So that means you're going to need to know a lot more for AP exams, and you're going to need to know things in a particular subject matter, such as biology, physics, US history, whichever test you decide to take. And another big difference between the SAT and the AP is that most AP exams do have essays. As a matter of fact, they may have lots of essays. Sometimes half of your score is determined by the essays on the AP test. So if you are not as confident about your ability to write a timed essay in English, this is something you would want to consider when you're deciding which AP test to take. You might want to avoid the ones that have a lot of essays and where it's determining half of your score. But that said, if you do decide to take an AP test with essays, certainly a Manya AP prep course would help you to figure out what you need to do to write a high scoring essay. Okay, so what's the best thing about AP exams, especially for you since you're in India, so you're obviously not an American student. Your experience of high school is a little bit different. But the biggest asset to you as an Indian student is that, number one, good scores on AP exams help you to have a better chance of getting into a great college in the United States. But also, you might have the ability to actually earn college credit, which means that just by taking the exam, if you get a high enough score, you can actually earn credits toward graduation. So for instance, you might not need to go to college for quite as long, right? You might actually earn credits that allow you to graduate slightly earlier. Or you may simply be able to take courses in other subjects that are more advanced that you're more interested in, instead of wasting time on a class that might be easy in college if you're already more advanced in that subject. So those are really your two primary reasons to care about advanced placement tests: admission to college, but also the possibility of earning college credit. So let's talk a little bit more about whether you can actually get college credit, because it is not guaranteed. It really depends on what score you receive on the test, and it also depends on the policy of the particular college that you want to attend. Now, just to give you an idea, AP scores go on the range of 1 to 5. So 1 is the lowest possible score, 5 is the highest, and you receive a whole number score. So you receive a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. If you were to get a perfect score, which is a 5, there's a very good chance that you would receive college credit from most colleges. If you receive a score of a 4, then you would probably get college credit from a lot of colleges, not necessarily all of them. Again, it's always up to the discretion of the college. If you score a 3, that's considered a more average score, which means some colleges would not give you college credit for that. Maybe some of them would, but there's a larger number that would not. And if you receive a lower score of 1 or 2, there's a chance that that score is not going to help you in any way. It's not going to earn you college credit, and it's not going to look particularly good on your application as well. So nothing is completely set in stone. It depends on what score you get, and it depends on the policy of the college that you're applying to. But you can often figure out this information either by going to a college website, or maybe even a quick Google search for a particular college and a particular test might help. So there are ways of finding these things out, but ultimately it's going to come down to the discretion of the college that you wind up attending, what they do with that AP score. But again, it can range anything from being able to earn college credit, or being able to qualify out of an introductory course. So for example, if you get a high score on the biology test, then you may not be required to take some of the core curriculum science courses when you go to college, right? You might be able to move on to something more advanced. Or if you're interested in a completely different major that's not science related, then you may not need to waste your time on those courses that are already related to your AP. So this is the reason why a lot of people do care about AP scores. Now, I mentioned also that strong AP scores can help you in the college admissions process. And I'm guessing that for a lot of you, that is your most immediate concern, right? You may not really care at this point whether you get college credit for the AP, but you may have your sights set on a very competitive school in the United States. And you know, of course, that there are a lot of students applying to that school, and you want to do everything you can to look like a good applicant. Now, I want to show you two fictional students. And these students I would call very good students. They're not necessarily the best of the best. These students probably would not get into an Ivy League college, but these are students who could get into some very competitive colleges in the United States. And if you look at the statistics here, we can see that one student scored a 1330 on the SAT, the other one scored a 1310. And if we were translating this into ACT scores, it would be almost the same score, maybe a 20, 28, 27, somewhere around there. So they have virtually the same SAT scores. Their grade point averages are very close, right? Within 0.03 points of each other. So effectively the same GPA. And when it comes to their class grades, you can see that their class grades are fairly close also. Like one student got a B+ in calculus AB and an A+ in physics. The other one got an A- in both calculus and physics. Those seem to kind of average out. So if a person on a college admissions committee were looking at student A and student B, they would look virtually the same, right? There would be no way to decide between these two students just based on this data. But let's say we were to add in scores on advanced placement tests. Now, if we add that in, you can see that now one of these students has the big advantage, right? Student A scored a 4 on calculus AB on the actual exam. Student A scored a perfect 5 on the physics exam. Student B got 3s on those exams, which is considered more of an average level set of scores. So now that we add in AP scores, you can see that student A is clearly the better, more accomplished candidate. So this is a key reason why people, even in India, will take AP exams, try to get high scores on them, because as you can see, it can make your application stand out in a very positive way. And again, I'll just remind you that most students in the United States who are trying to get into highly selective colleges have taken at least one AP exam, and some of them have taken many. So it's not to put a lot of pressure on you, right? I'm not saying that you need to go out and take 5 AP exams. It's just good to know that many students are offering this. Okay, so let's talk about what is actually being tested on these exams. And so again, the purpose of one of these tests is to show that you have a strong competency in the material. And it should be the same kind of competency you would have in an introductory college course. So nobody expects you to be an expert in these subjects, but they expect you to have more knowledge than, say, the average American high school student would have. And because remember, it's the brightest students in American high schools that take AP exams. It's not the kids who are struggling to get through school. So that means you will be tested on a wide variety of different things, but only within a particular subject. And I'm actually going to give you a complete list of all of the AP exams. So I have them all up here on the slide. And so feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to, if you want a complete list of them. Now you can also find this list in other places like at collegeboard.org because the College Board is the one who actually writes these tests. But when you look at this list, you realize, well, there's an AP exam for almost everybody. And they tend to fall into basic categories. We obviously have a lot of science exams here. So we have, computer science, we have biology, chemistry, physics, environmental science. They even have different physics exams, right? So they have the algebra-based physics exam, mechanics, electricity and magnetism, and there's even a psychology exam, which is also under the science heading. So sciences are a big topic here. Obviously, we have a lot of foreign language exams in languages that may or may not be commonly spoken where you are, but in the United States or in other parts of Asia, you might find people who are really adept in, say, Chinese, Japanese, etc. We have humanities exams, so those would be the English language and English literature, which are two slightly different exams. One of them is focused more on writing and argumentative skills. The other one is more focused on actual literature, like novels, plays, and short stories written in the English language, basically British and American literature. Then we have history exams. That would be American or US history, European history. There's also one called human geography. There's a very new test called African American history. And then we have one called US government and politics, which is entirely about the United States governmental system. There's one called comparative government and politics, which is a little bit broader. It might encompass political systems outside of the United States, like in Canada or even Europe. And then there are even some art tests. So there's art and design, art history, music theory. There are a wide range of tests here. Now, I will tell you from my own experience that out of all of these tests, some of them are very rarely taken by any students. Some of them are just not popular at all. Others of these tests are very popular. The tests that are going to be the most popular in the United States are English language, English literature, US history, US government and politics, and also all of most of the science tests. The ones that would be the most popular in the United States would be Calculus AB or maybe Calculus BC, although fewer students are going to take that. Biology, chemistry, the algebra-based physics 1 is going to be popular. So those are really the most popular ones in the United States. But it doesn't matter whether you take a test that's popular in the United States or not. So you don't have to feel obligated to take the English language exam just because a lot of American students will be doing that. If you don't think you can score well on that exam, that's not a good choice for you. You obviously want to choose subjects that you already feel strong in. And for a lot of Indian students, that would be any of the science tests or any of the math tests. Or if you do happen to speak a foreign language well, then you might consider one of those. But lots of Indian students are going to focus on the science and math-based tests, and that's perfectly fine because colleges are definitely impressed with scores on those tests. So again, it would make the most sense to take one of these tests if you've already done a lot of coursework in this area in school. It wouldn't make sense to take one of these tests if you have almost no background in the material. So for instance, if you feel as though you know very little about United States history, then it really wouldn't make sense to try to prepare for the AP test in a short period of time. You could potentially prepare for it over a longer period of time. If you gave yourself, say, a year to learn US history, you could be ready for that test. But obviously, this is not something you can cram for. So pick the subjects that appeal most to you. And as far as the number of exams you can take, it's unlimited. You can take as many exams as you want to, but keep in mind that all these exams are offered at the same time of year. They're all offered in the month of May. So if you do choose to take multiple exams, you would be taking them all around the same time, right? Basically within the same week or two window, which is a lot to prepare for. When I work with students, usually the month of April is busy because they're really trying to prepare for their advanced placement exams. This year, the AP exams were offered in the second and third months of May, and that's the way it's going to work every year. So they're always offered in May. In the United States, students will typically take these exams at school, and most of them are now computer-based, which means you are sitting down at a computer to take the test. It's not a paper and pencil test in most cases, although there are so many AP exams that may not be universally true, but most of the popular ones are now computer-based. And in your situation, since you're in India, my guess is that you maybe in some cases will have to be more selective about where you take the test. If you happen to go to a very small school, it's not always guaranteed that they're going to offer all of these AP exams, but there should be some way to take it. And some students even have access to an online test, but especially during COVID, that was popular, although I think they're trying to encourage most students to take it at a school instead at this point. So there should be some way for you to take the test, but you'll be taking it at the same time that American students are taking APs. So every AP exam has different components. For instance, they're all going to have some multiple choice questions, and the multiple choice questions usually have 5 answer choices. In some cases, maybe 4, but it's usually 5. And there will also be some form of writing question. Now, it depends on the subject matter. Some subjects, such as United States history or literature, really lend themselves to a long, in-depth essay, right? So sometimes you will be writing, a 5-paragraph essay, and you might even have to write 3 of them in order to get through the exam. But some subject matters obviously don't lend themselves as well to essays. So, for example, math or maybe one of those physics tests, it might not make sense to ask students to write a 5-paragraph essay, right? But there's a good chance, though, you will still be asked to present something in written form. So, for example, they might give you a math problem and they might say, explain to us exactly how you solved this math problem, right? So a kind of step-by-step approach to solving it. And so it's not an essay, but it's still written work. It's essentially a short answer question. And there are a lot of exams, by the way, that also have short answer questions where maybe you only write a paragraph instead of writing 5 paragraphs. So it varies, but virtually every test has a combination of multiple choice and a written essay or long question. And both of those are going to they're both going to count toward your score. On some tests, it will be 50-50. The multiple choice is 50% of your score. The writing questions are 50% of your score. But on other tests, it may be a little different. Sometimes the multiple choice questions are a lot more important. Now, all of this typically takes about 3 hours. And that includes some breaks. So usually the first half of the test is multiple choice, and then the rest of it involves those essays or written questions. So you will have specific sections that you work on. You're free to skip around within the section, you cannot skip ahead to any other section. So while you're working on the multiple choice questions, you can't skip ahead and decide to do the essays. The essays will have their own specific timing. For most people, the timing on the test will be a bit of a challenge, but not unreasonable. So most people will feel it's possible to answer all the questions in the allotted time, but of course you don't have unlimited time, so you do need to budget your time wisely. So let's talk a bit more about AP exam scoring. As I mentioned, all of these tests are scored on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest possible score, 5 being the highest perfect score. And according to the College Board, these are the people who write the AP exams, they claim that a score of 5 means that you are extremely well qualified in that subject matter, and it's equivalent to getting an A or an A+ on a test in school. If you score a 4, it means you're very well qualified, which is the equivalent of an A-, B+, maybe a B, although I would say, you know, in some schools, a B is not considered a very good grade. So we'll say, you know, maybe a B, but certainly A- or B+. A score of 3 is about average. It means you're qualified, but not exceptional. And like I said, there are some colleges that will not give you any particular credit or, you know, consideration for having gotten a 3. In the example I gave you earlier, right, the student who got the 2 3s would have been less qualified than the student who got the 4 and the 5. So a 3 is not a terrible score, but it's not considered an exceptionally good score. And then obviously a 1 or a 2 would be undesirable scores. You're unlikely to get, you know, any particular credit for those. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that if you score a 1 or a 2 on an AP exam, you probably should not disclose that on your application because it's not going to benefit you. But if you took multiple AP exams and let's say one of them happened to be a 3, that's okay, right? You're showing that you put in the effort, you took multiple exams, and if you had some 4s and 5s mixed in there too, the whole thing is going to look pretty good. Here's a little bit more detail on how scores are distributed on the individual tests. Every individual test has its own particular average score. So for example, on the English language test, the average score is close to a 3. It's a 2.86, which is fairly high. But on something like Physics 1, the average score tends to be lower, more like a 2.4. So that's good to keep in mind because if you do take, say, the Physics 1 test, and let's say your score is a 4, you shouldn't feel bad about that, right? A 4 is actually a very, you know, above average exceptional score on Physics 1 because students do tend to score lower on it. And certainly if you got a 5, that would be incredibly good. So every test is a little different. I don't know why biology scores are a bit higher. I'm guessing it's just because biology is less math based, right? So it's more about just knowledge of the material. And of course, there are many more tests than what I have on the slide, but these tend to be the most popular ones in the United States. And what's also interesting about my chart is you can see that most people in all of these tests are scoring a 2 or a 3. Right, we don't have as many 4s and 5s. As a matter of fact, you can see that in English literature, only 5% of the students who take English literature will get a perfect score of 5. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you're aiming for a 5, that's an excellent goal. Just bear in mind that the test is set up to make sure that only very few people score a 5. They're not going to let, you know, half the people taking the test get a 5. That would be skewed. But it also means not as many people are getting 1s either. So if you put in the effort, you're likely to get at least a 2, but I would say if you take a Princeton Review Mania course, you're going to get a minimum of a 3, right? And probably more like a 4 or 5 if you put in the full effort. Just to give you an idea, I just finished working with a student this spring who was preparing for the English language exam. And she spent several months preparing for the exam, and she did manage to get a 5. So she was in that top 9% of people who get 5s, and she was very happy about it. So if you learn the strategies and you put in the effort, you can see some excellent results. All right, so now let's just talk about some general things to keep in mind when you're preparing for these tests. Now, of course, because there are so many of them, I couldn't possibly cover all of them. But I'm going to show you some little excerpts from a couple of tests just to give you an idea. And I'm going to give you just some tips you can use overall to score more points. So I'm going to give you a really powerful strategy here that you may or may not have ever heard of before. But this is a good strategy for all standardized tests, but including the AP. Now, we know that this is a timed test, and all standardized tests are timed. And I'm sure you've had the experience of feeling as though you're running out of time, right? The clock is running and you have a few questions left over that you just don't have time to answer. And maybe it's only 2 or 3 questions, but in an extreme case, it could be 10 questions that you haven't answered. Now, if you were to choose random letters for all of those remaining questions, there's a good chance you're just going to get them all wrong, right? But if you use a different strategy, if you decide, well, I'm actually going to use the same letter guess for all of my random guesses, well, now you've tipped the odds in your favor. Now you're actually going to tend to score a lot more points by doing that. So we call this letter of the day. It just means that anytime you come to a question that you can't answer, or you're running out of time and you could answer it, but you just don't have the time for it, you're going to pick the letter of the day option. So here's just a contrast. Let's say you were guessing on, 9 questions. If you guess on 9 questions, well, obviously, if there are 4 answer choices, your chances of getting the answer right are 1 out of 4, right? So if you guess on 9 questions, mathematical odds would say you're going to get at least 2 of them right, maybe even 3 of them right. Well, letter of the day will essentially guarantee that that works, right? Because if you say choose your letter of the day of B, you could easily score the 3 points. But if you choose random letters, right, it's quite possible that you could just miss all of them. So this is why letter of the day works. There is no special letter that you should choose. Okay, if there was a special letter like B, I would certainly tell you what that letter is. But the truth is every test is different. So there's no way to know which correct answer is more likely to occur on the test. It could be any of them. But use the letter of the day strategy if you are randomly guessing, right? Obviously, most of the time you're not randomly guessing. Most of the time you're taking an educated guess, but this is for random guessing. And by the way, you can use this strategy on the SAT as well. All right, here's another basic strategy that you should always try to use. On the multiple choice questions, which at least half of them will be, sometimes most of them will be, you should always think in terms of process of elimination. Because sometimes you may not know exactly what the correct answer is. But if you can find wrong answers and eliminate them through process of elimination, then you may get the right answer, even though you didn't know what it was on your own. So for example, let's say you were on a history exam and they ask you something like this: who was the 13th president of the United States? Now, if you ask that to most people, including most Americans, they're going to have no idea, okay? Because we've had over 50 presidents, so it would be really difficult to memorize them all. But if you have some multiple choice options, for instance, George Washington, well, any American is going to know that George Washington was the first president of the United States. So that can't be the correct answer. Millard Fillmore, most people probably have not heard of, including a lot of Americans, because he was not a well-known president. But we do know about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was president probably when your parents were, young adults, or maybe even you might even have an older brother or sister who remembers Ronald Reagan, right? So we know Ronald Reagan wasn't the 13th president. And obviously, Joe Biden is not the 13th president. He is our current president. So this is an example of how process of elimination can get you the correct answer. Because even if you have no idea who Millard Fillmore is, the other choices just don't apply. Now, by the way, this is not the kind of question that you would exactly see on an AP exam. This is a much more simple question. The history questions on the AP tend to be a lot more complicated, and they tend to be based on specific text material and not just a standalone question. But this question is here just to illustrate the power of process of elimination. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a question that is more typical of an advanced placement question. And this happens to be a question from the US history exam, but keep in mind a lot of exams will be structured this way. What they're going to do is give you a short paragraph to read. In this case, it says it's based on something written by John L. O'Sullivan, The Great Nation of Futurity, and it was written in 1839. Now, we could read this whole thing, and if you'd like to read it, feel free. But when we just skim over it, we can see that it has something to do with the future, American greatness. It says a nation of many nations is destined to manifest to mankind the excellence of divine principles. So it's obviously talking about America. It's written in 1839, so that was when the country was well established, but still exploring parts of the Western United States. So the point is, we can often eliminate answers just based on some keywords and also based on this date, right? Because it says specifically that this was written in 1839. So this question asks, which of the following presidents is most closely associated with the concept of manifest destiny? Okay, so again, they're asking about a president. It's very difficult to have all the presidents memorized because there are so many of them. But if we just know that they're talking about 1839, that's going to help us to do some process of elimination. Because if you look at the options here, again, there are some that will just clearly be wrong. Ronald Reagan was a president in the 1980s, so we know he could not have been the president in 1839, and he could not be associated with manifest destiny. Now, Woodrow Wilson, that's a name that most people would associate with World War I. World War I was in 1914. It was not in 1839. So those two answers you could confidently eliminate. And then if you had to, you could choose between the two remaining answers. If you have no idea who James K. Polk or Andrew Johnson was, then it would just be a 50-50 guess. But a 1 out of 2 guess is certainly better than a 1 out of 4 guess. And some students would remember that Andrew Johnson was actually president right after the Civil War, and the Civil War was in the 1860s. So if you remember that, then through process of elimination, it's actually James K. Polk. But bear in mind, without answer choices, most students probably would not know the answer to this. So the fact that there are answer choices actually makes your job easier. And I know I'm showing you history related questions that may not make a whole lot of sense because you may not have a lot of background in United States history. But this same process of elimination is going to work on any test. It's even going to work on those math tests, right? Because if they give you a really hard math question, you can often eliminate things that are either too big or too small or just don't follow the right format. So always use that to your advantage. By the way, if you are taking a computer-based test, there is a feature on the test that allows you to physically cross out or strike out answer choices. So you can cross them out with your mouse or your cursor as you go along, and that way you can keep track of what is wrong to get yourself down to the correct answer. Now, I'm going to give you something that might be a little bit more up your alley because I bet a lot of you have taken a biology class. I'd like you to just read through this problem and just see if you can get the correct answer just based on what's in the chart. You probably don't need any outside knowledge for this. I'm just going to give you like a minute or two to read through it. So the key to this one is above the table, they tell us that table 1 is the percent change in mass. So if the question is asking for the percent change in mass closest to 0, you might have noticed that on the right side of that table, there's a pattern to the numbers, right? They start off larger, plus 17.5. The next one is a little smaller, plus 5. The next one is below 0, negative 7.5, and then the numbers get even smaller from there. So if you're looking for the percent change that is closest to 0, it would make sense that this would be somewhere between the plus 5 and the minus 7.5, right? So if it's between the plus 5 and the minus 7.5, that means the sodium chloride concentration should be somewhere between 0.3 and 0.5. That's on the left side of the table. So notice you don't actually need any knowledge about this to get this particular answer. You don't have to know much about sodium chloride. Now, if you do, then fantastic. You might know this has something to do with, I don't know, isotonic solutions, or biology is not my area, so I can't tell you too much about it. But the point is, a lot of the questions will be answerable just based on the data. And that's true with other types of tests too. They do require you to have outside knowledge, but some of the questions you can get just by a careful reading of the text or the data, and that's good news. So I think that's why so many students are able to get at least a 3, because even if you feel your knowledge is a little weak, you can answer questions like this and use process of elimination and often still score some good points. Okay, so let's see. We're going to talk about the basic strategy for essays. And again, there are many different types of essays. If you're taking a science course, or sorry, a science test, the essays are obviously going to be much more specific about specific science topics. And if you're taking a math test, it's not really going to be an essay. It's going to be more like a free response, explain how you got the answer question. But assuming that you're writing some sort of essay for the AP, there are 3 basic steps you always want to follow. First of all, carefully read and understand exactly what the prompt question is asking you for. Because if you misinterpret that question and you write about something off topic, your essay score is going to be very low. And if your essay score is very low, it's obviously going to bring your entire score down, because on some tests, the essays comprise a big portion of your overall 1 through 5 score. So if necessary, read that essay prompt 2 or 3 times to make sure that you really understood exactly what they were asking for and that your essay or your free response is going to address that issue. If the question is opinion-based in any way, take a clear position. Don't be vague. Don't think that you have to take 2 positions. Take a strong position on whatever they're asking you for, if it's that kind of essay. And then finally, make sure that you can come up with a rough organization of your essay before you start writing it. So in other words, you should know what you want to cover in paragraph 1, what you want to cover in any middle body paragraphs. You should know all of that before you start writing it. Don't just pick up your pen and start writing, or type the essay, depending on whether you're taking a computer-based or a paper-based test. By the way, understanding the prompt, taking a clear position, and organizing should take you about 5 minutes in most cases. The only exception to that would be an essay prompt that requires you to do a lot of reading. Okay, if they give you several articles or documents that you have to read in order to write the essay, then they will understandably give you more time. They might give you 10 or 15 minutes to read that material. But if it's a simple question, I would say spend about 5 minutes coming up with ideas, and at the end of 5 minutes, you should be writing. If it's a very short, they call them short answer question, essay prompt, then you're not even going to spend 5 minutes. You're maybe only going to spend about a minute coming up with ideas, and then you must immediately start writing. And when you do take an AP exam, I would suggest you either wear a simple analog watch so that you can keep track of the time, or make sure you can easily see a clock in the room to keep track of time, because it's easy to lose time and run out of time when you're writing the essays. All right, so to summarize some of what we've talked about here, ultimately the best way to succeed on an AP exam is to know the content very well. Now, a lot of you already know a lot of this content just by virtue of having taken a course in school. So if you think about the courses that you're going to take next year in high school, you could easily plan your approach to the AP exams around that. You know, if you're taking an advanced biology class next year, then the end of next year would be the perfect time to do the AP biology exam. But if you feel like for some reason you didn't pick up all the knowledge that you need from your class, of course there are books you can use to prepare yourself. There are books published by the Princeton Review. And if you feel like you just need a big review of things before the test, that's what Manya and the Princeton Review are here for, to give you that review of the content. If you take an AP course with us, we will review all of the knowledge that you need for the test, and we will also give you very specific pointers on how to succeed on the essays, which are often a big part of the test. And so, yes, the knowledge is important, but again, it's a standardized test, which means you also need to know a lot about the test. That's what we specialize in at Manya and the Princeton Review. So you can get the score that you need, and we are here to help you with that. At this point, I would welcome any questions that you might have. If you do have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat. And it was a real pleasure working with all of you. If you don't have any questions, then that's it for now. I would encourage you to check out our AP courses at manyagroup.com. And if you happen to get any emails from us, feel free to respond to those emails and somebody would be happy to help you further. So that's about it for my presentation, but I will just wait to see if anybody has any questions. And it looks like I have at least one coming in. Okay, so Arnav, where should you get study material? If you're just looking for books, the best thing to do is go to wherever you normally buy books and look for any book written by the Princeton Review. Okay, but if you want something more in depth, like something that's more like an actual course, that's when you'll go to manyagroup.com to check out their course offerings. But Princeton Review does have a lot of great books. And let's see, AP Exam Brother. I have never heard of that. Sorry, I don't know what AP Exam Brother is. So it's not something that Manya offers, I don't think, but maybe the other presenter can correct me on that. Okay, Sumed asks a good question. How much time do you need to prepare before the AP exam? That's a great question. You know, different people approach it in different ways. The student that I told you about who actually managed to score a perfect 5 on her English test, she actually chose to start in the fall, which was very early. Okay, so we started in the fall and by May, she felt fully prepared to take the test. Not everybody is going to start that far in advance. I would say most people are going to start sometime in the winter, like in February or March. There are some people who might wait until April. I would call those people a little bit last minute, but we do often offer courses for people who are waiting a little bit longer. So I think if you start to think about what type of preparation you want to do, the winter time, like February or March, would be a good time to get started and get serious about it. Okay, and Ann Mall put a helpful link into the chat. Thank you for doing that. How many AP exams should you take? The basic answer to that is you want to take AP exams in the subjects that you know well, that you feel confident about. Okay, so if you don't feel confident about taking, 5 tests, you shouldn't do that, right? You should focus on the ones where you have the skill and you have the knowledge. But like I said earlier, American students who apply to college typically take at least 1 or 2 AP exams. And some of them do even take a lot more. Some of them do take 5 or 6. So that gives you an idea. So that means if you want to be highly competitive, you really should do at least 1 or 2 of these, but pick the subjects that you feel most confident about. And Sumed, you can actually take as many AP exams as you want to, but just bear in mind, they're all in May, right? So you'll be taking all of them around the same time. So if you do choose to take, say, 5 AP exams, you're taking them all around the same time in May. Like you might take 1 on Tuesday and 1 on Wednesday and another one on Friday. So you have to keep in mind whether it's realistic for you to prepare for that many at once. It's kind of up to you. But maybe you're also asking me, how many times can you take the same exam? And the answer to that is only once. You can only take it once. If you want to take it again, you would have to wait until the following year. Okay, so you can't take the physics test 3 times in May, right? You can only take it once. And if for some reason you're not happy with that score, you would have to wait until the following May to take it again. Most people don't do that. Most people just take it once. Are there any previously released tests that you can take? Yes, the College Board does publish official practice tests. So you can get those again at any bookstore. You can also order them directly from the College Board website. But unfortunately, they don't offer that many practice tests. So that's why taking a Manya course is a better option, because you're going to have more access to materials than you would directly from the College Board. Our tests and our practice materials are designed to be as close to the actual exam as possible. For instance, that's one of my jobs, is actually creating practice AP tests for students, and I try to make them as close as possible to the actual exam without violating any copyright laws. Okay, I'll just wait a little bit longer and see if anyone else has questions, but if you don't have any questions, then I will wish you a good night and good luck with the rest of your AP and SAT practice. Thank you everyone for attending. You're welcome, Enmal. I'm not sure about the recording, and Mal might know about that. Or our other presenter might know about that. I believe it may be automatically posted for you. It will be posted to the YouTube channel. Okay, thank you for letting me know.
So thank you, Gina, for giving us your precious time.
You're welcome. Thank
And if
you.
you have any further queries, so feel free to reach out to us at Manya the Princeton Review, or you can mail us at thecare@manyagroup.com.
Have a good night, everyone.